Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to Little's Law YouTube channel. This is me, Vasan Shanmugam. I'm your host, and today we're going to dive deep into one of the most LoadRunner's most important error handling function, and that is LR continue on error. So, for explaining or for giving you a walkthrough on it, I have prepared a comprehensive demo with few different scenarios that I have personally tested, and I'm going to show you the actual execution logs and results. So if you have ever wondered how to handle the errors gracefully in your LoadRunner scripts, or if you have been frustrated with scripts that stop abruptly when something goes wrong, this video is exactly what you need. By the end of this tutorial, you will understand all 5 modes of LR continue on error and know exactly when and how to use them in real world performance testing. So let's get started. So firstly, before I jump into the code, let me explain you what is this LR continue on error does. What does this LR continue on error code does? So in LoadRunner, when your script encounters an error like a failed HTTP request, it can be a timeout or it can be even a DNS resolution failure. So the default behavior depends on your runtime settings. So you can configure this in runtime settings under miscellaneous error handling. So you typically have two options. Let me quickly show that to you. So under runtime settings, under miscellaneous, we do have an option which is continue on error. If I check it, if I check the box, which means I can continue on error. If I uncheck it, means I should stop on error. So now the challenge here is runtime settings apply to your entire script. But what if you want different error handling for different parts of your script? For uh, for a particular transaction you want to continue, and for a particular scenario you want to stop. So this is where the LR continue on error becomes incredibly powerful, because it gives you a surgical precision to control the error handling at the code level, right? Not at the script level, but at the code level, but even for the transaction level for specific transactions or operations. So the functions accepts a single parameter number from 0 to 4, and each number represents a different error handling mode, and that's what we're going to see today. So talking about the mode 0. So first, let me explain you the mode 0, which is silent continuation. So when you see the LR continue on error of 0, which means your script continues execution regardless of errors, and no error messages are returned to the log, and it's completely silent. So use this when you want to suppress any error logging entirely. And moving to the mode 1, so continue with brief messages, because this is the most commonly used mode. With LR continue on error of 1, right? uh, the script continues on errors and it writes a brief message to your output log. So you get continuation plus visibility. So the best of both worlds. And then the mode 2. So in mode 2, you can use the runtime settings. This resets the behavior back to whatever you have configured in your runtime settings. So think of it as a reset to default command. So use this after you have temporarily enabled any error continuation for specific sections. And in mode 3, we have got selective continuation. This mode continues only for specific type of errors. It's more selective than modes 0 and 1. And then mode 4, where we're going to force stop on error, because this explicitly tells LoadRunner to stop on any error regardless of runtime settings, and use this when certain operations are absolutely critical and it must succeed. And now let me show you these mode in action with real code and actual logs. So the important setup note before you want to try this is we have like several scenarios, like scenario 1, scenario 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. So we have like different scenarios with various combinations of testing. And here, before I even start, before we look at the scenarios, let me show you something very important that I discovered during the testing. So in my runtime settings, if I go to my runtime settings, Under miscellaneous, I initially had stop on error, which means I have not checked the continue on error. I have unchecked it, which means I'm going to stop on error. So let me show you what happened. Let me close this first. So let me quickly run this scenario. So when I ran this scenario here, let me go to the view, layouts, and then the replay layout. And in here, I'll show you the error section. So if you see here, when I ran the scenario one with an invalid URL and without calling LR continue on error, the script stopped immediately. So if I go to this line, see, it has stopped immediately. Looking at the log, it says error 27794, which is it could not resolve the address. And then ending action, the script terminated, right? So this is what has happened, or this is what will happen with this setup. So this is very crucial to understand because your runtime settings are the baseline behavior. So the LR continue on error function overrides this baseline for specific sections. So for this demo, to show all scenarios, I recommend you to set the runtime settings to continue on error. So let me go back to the runtime settings and I select continue on error. Or also you can use another way where you can ensure each scenario uses the LR continue on error appropriately. So now let me take you through each setting, which is through. So let me save this first. Going back to the code again. So now we are in scenario one, right? Let me explain it to you first. So let's start with scenario one where we demonstrate the default runtime settings behavior. So here I'm starting a transaction called the transaction default stop. So if you see here, I've got this transaction, which is the transaction default stop, and making a web request to an invalid URL, right? And just notice I have not called LR continue on error before this. So LoadRunner will use whatever is configured in runtime settings. And let me quickly do a quick run. Going back to the replay log. So here, if you see, when this ran with, so for now I've selected as continue on error, right? If in case, let me go back to the runtime settings and I'm like stopping on error. And if I run it back again, go to view, layouts, replay layout. And if you see, yep. So when this ran with stop on error in runtime settings, the script terminated immediately, right? In line number 25. And again, the error 27794 could not resolve address and the transaction ended with failed status, ending action script stop. So the message, this line executes only if runtime settings allow continuation, which never appeared before the script stopped. So this demonstrates why we need LR continue on error for better control. So for example, if I run the same scenario, see now it has ended at line number 25, right? If I go back to my runtime settings, select the continue on error, and if I run it again, just remember when we were running stop on error, we got the test to stop at 25 after this one, right? But now after I have selected continue on error, if you see it has moved further, right, to line number 41. And let me show you what exactly has happened. So moving on to scenario 2. So before the transaction, I'm calling the LR continue on error of 0. I'll go back to that place. If you see here, before the transaction, right? This transaction starts here, correct? The scenario starts here, but the transaction starts here. That is, transaction continues silent. But before even the transaction started, what I did is I'm calling the LR continue on error of 0, which means I'm telling LoadRunner continue on errors, but don't log any error messages. That's my message to the LoadRunner. So when I first tested with stop on error in runtime settings, if you see it stopped at 25, right? Even mode 0 could not override it. The script still stopped, and this is because mode 0 primarily controls the error messaging, not necessarily any continuation in all circumstances. But when runtime settings allowed continuation, right? it went up to 45, line number 45, right? So the mode 0 works beautifully. The script continues with no continuing after error messages in this log. So the learning here is the mode 0 that you see here suppresses the error messages, right? If you see here the output, so if you see, it suppresses the error messages, right? And the next thing is, but again, it may not override these strict stop on error runtime settings. For reliable, we can use mode 1. And now let's move on to the third one. So here I'm using the mode 1, right? So what I'm going to do is, so to show you about the mode 1, so previously saw the default one and then mode 0, now it is mode 1, and this is where the things really get interesting. I'm using LR continue on error of 1, and let me quickly save and execute it. And let me quickly check the runtime settings. Okay, let's continue on error. I wanted to replay it with stop on error, so I ran it with stop on error. And let me quickly go to the replay layout. Yep, and you can see here, right? So let me explain to you. So now at looking at this execution log carefully, even with stop on error, right? So I have made it to stop on error, but what happened is it has executed all the lines, right? If you can see here, it went up to the last line of the script. So the continuation error, the 2, 7, 9, and 4 could not resolve address, and the highest severity level was continue on error, right? So continuing after error in, we use a script. The script continued and executed. So script continued with brief error message. If you see here, right, the mode 1. So this is the power of mode 1. It successfully overrides the runtime settings and continues execution while logging what went wrong. And this is why mode 1 is the most used mode in real world LoadRunner scripts. You get continuation despite any errors. You get to see the full visibility into what failed, and you get to get the complete control over the script flow, right? And now let's move on to the script, the scenario 4. So let me go back to the code again. Scenario 4. Let me quickly make some changes and then I'll explain to you quickly. So the scenario 4, it again it has the mode 1, but what's the difference here? So this demonstrates one of the most important patterns in professional load runner scripting. So if you're someone who wants to improve your professional load runner scripting, please do follow this. And looking at the structure here, right? So you're able to see the structure of that here. So firstly, I enabled mode 1 for an optional service call, and this might be a recommendation engine and analytics service are a third-party API that should not break your main flow if it is down. And notice in the log, right? So you'll be able to see um, continuing after error, right? For the optional service that kept going, and then immediately after I call LR continue of error 2. Let me quickly search that again. Where is that again? Okay, it's not here. Okay, so what I'll do is let me quickly save it and do a quick execution. Go back to view, layouts, replay layout. So now let me quickly complete the scenario 4. So this scenario 4, that is the LR continue on error, resets back to the runtime settings behavior before calling the critical service. Because if you see here, it shows the critical service call succeeded, right? The critical service call succeeded, and the transaction has got completed. And this pattern is essential because it enables the error continuation only for specific risky operations, and then reset to default. And don't leave error continuation active for your entire script, and think of it as like kind of a surgery where you make precise control changes and then restore to normal behavior. And then moving on to the scenario 5 here, right? So the scenario 5, let me quickly show you the code as well. So the scenario 5, yeah, sorry, it's on the top. Yeah, so here is scenario 5. And what happens here again? I use allow continuing error of 1, which is mode 1. So in my original code that you see here, I had a syntax error previously, and it nearly took me to the error. I believe I can see it now here as well. The scenario 5, yep, so that the one that you see here. So the one that you see here, the connection type argument is missing or empty and the database connection failed. So the pattern is I'm enabling the error continuation with mode 1, and I'm attempting the database connection and I'm capturing the return code, and I'm checking if the RC is equal to 0, and if it is 0 then it is a success, and if successful I execute queries and disconnect, and if I failed I implement the fallback logic. I use cached data, I try backup DB, or I skip this operation. This is how resilient the scripts handle database connectivity issues in production environments. And moving on to the scenario 6 here, right? The one that you see here, it has no errors. As you see here, it is completely clear. So here in this code, I'm making a search. I'm making a search for example domain, which actually exists on example.com. So the pattern here is I have registered my validation using web reg find with the save count. I'm enabling the error continuation. I'm making the web request. I check the save count parameter. I explicitly pass or fail the transaction based on validation. And this gives me the business logic level validation, because the HTTP request might return 200 OK, but if the content is wrong, you still fail the transaction. This is how you implement the meaningful validation beyond just HTTP status code. And if you see here, let me just quickly walk you through the scenario 6 code. Yep, so this is the one. I'm doing an LR output message, and then I'm starting the transaction here with the LR continuing error of 1. I'm doing a quick web reg find when I'm searching for the text example domain in the example.com website, and then I'm doing, if the validation is passed, then I'm creating a LR pass, and then I'm doing an LR fail with this transaction. And then the scenario 7, where I'm going to demonstrate the mode 4, right? So previously we saw 0 and 1, and now it is 4, right? So what does this do here? What does this scenario, the mode 4 does here is, and why do I need to use mode 4? So sometimes you want to guarantee that certain operations cannot fail silently. For example, like login operations, critical data setup, or license checkouts, or the authentication token registration. So if these fails, there is no point continuing the test, right? So the mode 4 ensures the script stops immediately if these critical operations fail, regardless of what runtime settings say. So in this scenario, I'm using a very valid URL here, the one that you see here. So it succeeds, but if it had failed, the script would have stopped immediately, and that's what I have made here. The transaction must succeed and transaction completed successfully with mode 4. If this has failed, the script would have stopped immediately, and that is what I have set up with this script scenario 7 with the mod 4, right? The mode 4, sorry. And then in scenario 8, I'm doing a quick comparison of mode 0 versus mode 1 comparison, which is the final scenario where I directly compare the mode 0 with mode 1. So you can see the difference in logs as well. So first I test with mode 0, the one that you see here. So until this, it is mode 1. So I have an invalid URL which is called the script continues, but notice that no, that is continuing after error messages in the log. Then immediately after that, I've got the mode 1. Another invalid URL is called yes. So the script continues here, and you see continuing after error message in the log. So let me just go back and around like 200. Yeah, so here you can see the changes that I wanted to see. So the functional behavior is very similar, both continue, but the visibility is different. And mode 0 is for when you want clean logs without error messages. And mode 1 is for when you want continuation with visibility into what failed. So in 95% of cases, you should use mode 1. Only use mode 0 when you have a specific reason to suppress the error messages. If you find this video helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to Let's Law YouTube channel for more LoadRunner tutorials and performance testing content, and drop a comment below telling me what LoadRunner topic should I cover next, what challenges are you facing with error handling, and what other LR functions would you like me to explain. So the complete working script with all 8 scenarios is available in the description section. So download it, test it in your environment, and start building better scripts for today. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Keep testing, keep learning, take care, and bye bye.